Specific questions would be good.
Yeah, we'll
Rather than just having me ramble.
yeah, we'll go over that. Say and spell your first and last name.
Kevin Ferrar,
Registered you?
K-E-F-A-R-R, New York State DEC.
What is your exact position?
I am the Section Chief in the Special Projects Division.
What have we seen with the inclusion since your last map? I think it was September 2018. What have we seen?
Yeah, well, there hasn't been much change since September 2018. This is a long-term project. What we have seen is that over the last several years, concentrations of all the groundwater, except for the source area of the buildings have declined significantly, and most of them pulling down against the groundwater and drinking water standards.
We're looking at 4 proposals, right?
Well, this proposed plan is to address what we call operable units 1 and 2, which are the former manufacturing unit areas at the site, the old manufacturing buildings. And it's to address essentially where the old spills were, and we're going to talk about what the measures are to control these areas to keep them from recontaminating.
OU1 and OU2 are the most contaminated.
Yeah, they're the source areas, essentially. It's where the material was originally used.
What's the goal of this? Is this to get this to a unclassified site at all?
Well, right now, this facility, we're not going to be able to completely decontaminate under the buildings because the buildings are still active. Once the buildings are no longer being used, then we'll be able to completely decontaminate the area. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the current systems, which are operating to prevent off-site release of contaminants, are still functioning. And we're going to monitor that over time. And then as areas become available for further remediation, we'll do so.
Those proposed plans, multi-million-dollar plans, one was 7, one was 13. Who would pay for that?
The responsible party, IBM, is under order with the department, and my understanding is that they plan to continue with the remedial program.
So whether they are extracted out of the soil and then something goes on top, or whether they're just extracted out and IBM looks to pay for those?
IBM, I believe, is going to continue to be the funding party for this remedial program.
Talk about the public hearing tonight. I mean, you're going to issue and see what the public has to say about this. What's the process?
Yeah, in the remedial program, when we select remedy, what we do is we identify to the public what were the various alternatives that were evaluated, what we identify as the preferred alternative. And then once we hear the public comments, then we finalize a decision in a record of decision, which we anticipate will probably be out around early April.
As a final decision.
That will be the final decision for this operable unit, which is also the last of 7. There were 7 units for this site, and this is the last 2.
Is any of this contaminated groundwater or soil going into the rainy well, the main source here?
My understanding is that the plume does not extend as far as the Endicott Village well field. No, it's quite a ways away.
So the water is not being contaminated here?
Well, I'm not familiar with the current conditions around the rainy well, but my understanding is that the groundwater plume from this facility does not impact the village well field.
Will vapor intrusion machines still be continued to use in residential and commercial properties?
There's no plan to change any of the off-site remedial program as they currently are. The groundwater remedial systems will continue to be operated, and the vapor mitigation systems will continue to be operated.
There are about almost 500 vapor intrusion.
Something like that. There's several hundred sub-slab depressurization systems in the village.
That's throughout the site, right?
Yeah, throughout the off-site plume area.
Throughout the site. And last question from me is that the state of the groundwater and the state of the soil are both contaminated right now?
Inoperable unit 1 and 2, which we're going to talk about tonight, there is soil contamination and groundwater contamination. In the off-site areas, the groundwater plume, as I said earlier, has shrunk quite a bit. There's fairly low levels of volatiles in the groundwater off-site. But on-site, the levels of contamination are still required. We still need to address it.
And that's the most effective. Have they been progressing over time, though?
Yeah, the concentrations in the groundwater on the site have reduced by quite a bit. There's still enough in the ground there where we need to have IBM continue to operate the groundwater recovery and treatment systems to control the hydraulics. But the concentrations have come down quite a bit over the last 15 years or so.
In both the soil and the groundwater? Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And you said you can't talk about if this is a concern for the workers there right now. With the vapor intrusion.
You want to talk to the health department about health effects.
So could we finally see maybe everything cleaned up within the coming years? Is this something that's we're looking at decades?
It's hard to predict what's going to happen. Again, the remediation of the contamination that's under the buildings really depends on getting at it, having access to these areas. Once, as areas are no longer used, then we can get at them. And it's really the accessibility which is limiting our ability to directly connect at it. So as a result, indirectly, we're using, we're proposing to use groundwater recovery and treatment to continue to contain it so it doesn't get off the site.
And possibly take out everything? Possibly.
Eventually, the long-term goal would be to do that. That's not what we're talking about today.
How many years do you think that could go? Okay, all right, thank you.
How many water monitoring wells do we have at this point on the property?
I don't know.
Isn't it dozens,
Yeah,
right?
dozens.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Good luck, guys.
Excuse me, can you answer why they're not going to go with the thermal remediation with the heat?
We can talk about that during the meeting tonight.
We're gonna get underway right. We're actually late to get
Well, they
started,
didn't
so.
ask me.
Well, I
well, I'll be-
asked you, I'm part of the independent media.
Okay, I'll be glad to answer the question during the meeting.
This is our public meeting to discuss OU 1 and 2 for the IBM Endicott site, or the former IBM Endicott site. My name is Jess LaClair. I'm the project manager for DEC, and later on you'll be hearing from Julia Kenney. She's the DOH project manager. Tonight we're going to give a quick overview of the site. We're going to give the remedial history of OU 1 and 2s, the current conditions at the site. We're going to go over the exposure pathways, the remedial alternatives that we looked at, what our proposed remedial alternative is for the site, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So just quickly an overview of the site. We have OU 1, which is the railroad corridor source area to the north, and then the North Street area, which is OU 2. And this is the part that we're going to be talking about this evening and focusing on. But this is OU 3, the off-site plume. OU 4 is the former dry cleaning, the Ideal Cleaners plume. OU 5 is the Building 57, and OU 6 is the bedrock groundwater plume. And then OU 7 is the western area. So for OU 3, the ROD was issued a few years ago in March of 2015. It consisted of all the vapor intrusion mitigations, which was putting subslab depressurizations on multiple houses. There was a blanket approach to that. There's, Julia, what was the number?
453.
453 sites systems operating right now in the offsite portion. The ROD also consisted of groundwater extraction and treatment, which is continuing. At the time, there was an interremedial measure to do groundwater injections, and that stopped in December of 2017. We stopped doing the clean water injections. So just to show the progress on OU3, this is 2004. The dark purple is over 50,000 ppb. The dark blue, you have the map down here. The yellow was 5, and this whole area, for the most part, was above drinking water standards. Based on our data that we collected in 2018, most of the offsite plume is now below drinking water standards. It's now below the 5. And the contamination is just to this northern part right here, which is just south of the OU2 that we're going to be speaking about later. OU4 is the Ideal Cleaners site. That ROD was issued in 2010. It consisted of thermal treatment for the soils, groundwater extraction treatment, and again, vapor intrusion mitigation. The thermal treatment ended, and the soils in that area meant unrestricted use. This is showing you what the groundwater is right now. Right now, TCE and PCE in the site are below 5, below the drinking water standards, and we just have cis left and vinyl chloride to continue dealing with. But both have reduced dramatically since 2007 when the remedy was put in place. OU5, or the Building 57, the ROD was issued in March of 2016 after the IRM was completed. There was thermal treatment in the source areas of the soils. Again, the soils in that area meant unrestricted use at the end of that. They continue with vapor mitigation in the area, and we continue with the groundwater extraction and treatment as well. And from our soil data, you can see the areas. We have the legend down here, what the SCOs were in these different areas of the sources, and what they are now where they reach, the soils are unrestricted use. OU6 is the bedrock groundwater. The ROD was issued in 2009. And that continues with the groundwater extraction treatment. And OU7, the ROB was issued last year, which is a monitored natural attenuation, and that also continues, that monitoring is part of the entire site groundwater system. So, to focus in on areas 1 and 2. This is an overview of the aerial. It has the different building numbers on it. The main building numbers that you'll hear us mention throughout the night are buildings 48, 45, 18, 41, and 42. So, back in 1997, it was when it was originally noticed that the PC tank was leaking, and that's when excavation was started. They pulled the tanks, they did an excavation down to the top of the water table. They started doing DNAPL recovery December of 1980. It continued until, it started January 1980 and continued to December of 1982. They removed 239,000 pounds of DNAPL at that point in time out of the recovery systems. At the same time, they also started doing the groundwater extraction and treatment right in the center of the site, NOU 1 and 2. In 2012, they did an IRM to look at the storm sewers. They went through, sampled the storm sewers, took out all the sediments. They removed approximately 20 55-gallon drums of sediment at that time. Can you just let me finish the presentation?
We
Then
just
we'll answer
said,
anything?
you're using some terms,
I'm sorry.
what was it, ROMs, DNAPL and stuff. Some of us aren't familiar with that. We appreciate maybe.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
The DNAPL is the dense non-aqueous phase liquid. I apologize. We get so used to using the acronyms that I forget. Which was the TCE and the PC contamination. What was the other term?
ROD.
ROD is the record of decision. So that's what happens after the PRAP is finished and the comment period ends. Then we issue the remedy, which we refer to as a remedial record of decision. Thank you.
And an IRM.
Interim remedial measure. In 2017, IBM was looking at the indoor air, and they started doing what they've termed a performance monitoring plan, which is different ways of looking at the indoor air in the buildings, sampling using hapsite, SUMA canisters, just looking at a different variety of things to make sure they can capture it fully. And they were doing quarterly sampling as opposed to what usually be required is only annually sampling. So that's one of the plans that's going on right now at the site that they started. And then in 2018, based on the data that they had gathered, they installed systems in building 42 and in building 45, 46.
Are those buildings occupied?
Yes,
Are those buildings what? What did she say?
if those buildings are occupied.
Oh,
Yes, they're all leased at this point in time. So this is just an overview of the groundwater at the site. So in OU1, the main extraction wells on the west and east side of the site are containing the groundwater in this portion. In the southern caption area, there's 2 groundwater wells in OU2 that are containing most of this. And then extraction well, it's hard to read in this map, but it's 284P is an OU3, and that captures what is leaving and not being captured on 1 and 2, which you'll see in some of the next slides. So our main contaminants at the site are PCE, TCE, and TCA. So those are the ones we focus on when we're looking at the groundwater. So this is just a comparison of what the groundwater looked like in 1980 versus where we are today. You can see the dark blue is greater than 500,000 ppb. Now this is in the center of the site. This building here is 18, and this is the 45. So in this general area, you can see it did go off the site into OU3. And now we've kind of broken into 2 separate areas. This is now the lighter shades, so in here it's between 5 and 50 ppb, and then there's a smaller area on site and on OU1 we have contained. So the plume has shrunk dramatically, actually. It's a similar story with TCE. Again, it's in the main part of the buildings, 45 and 46, and the southern part of 18. And the plume has shrunk into the site more, and what is getting off of OU 1 and 2 is being captured by the extraction on OU 3. And TCA has a similar story as the others. The main source areas are 45, 46, and building 18, also right along the railroad corridor area. And then again, most of the off-site has been pulled back onto the site for the most part. And we just have the source area, the highest area, at building 45, 46. So that's where we are right now with the concentrations. And I will turn it over to Julia to go over the health. Yes, right. And just down button. Down. Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Julia Kenney, and I work for the New York State Department of Health in the Bureau of Environmental Exposure Investigation. The State Health Department provides assistance to the Department of Environmental Conservation during the investigation and cleanup of sites such as the one we're talking about this evening. We make sure that both the investigation and cleanup are done in a manner which protects the public. By doing that, we evaluate data and make recommendations to address any potential exposure. We also ensure that the remedy selected is protective of public health. Now, it's important to understand that a chemical can cause a health effect only if it comes in contact with or enters the body. This contact is also known as exposure. We can be exposed to or come into contact with chemicals in the following ways. Inhalation, breathing, so breathing in contaminated vapors or dust. Next, direct contact, physically touching the chemical. And lastly, ingestion, eating contaminated soil or drinking contaminated water. The bottom line is, there's no exposure, there can be no health effect. Now, it's also important to note that exposure does not necessarily mean a health effect will occur. We are exposed to chemicals every day in our lives, in everything that we do. From the air we breathe, to the food we eat, to our common household products that we use. So being exposed to those chemicals doesn't necessarily mean we will have an adverse health effect. So I'm going to go through the potential exposure pathways at the site and how they're being addressed. So first, the ingestion of groundwater. Groundwater at this site is not used for drinking water purposes. The water you drink comes from a public water supply, which is routinely tested to ensure that it meets drinking water quality standards. Next, direct contact to soil. Direct contact with the contaminants is unlikely since the majority of the site, OU 1 and 2, is covered by buildings and pavement. In addition to that, site access is restricted, therefore limiting the potential for that exposure. Next is inhalation. Before I get into that, I just want to talk quickly about a process called soil vapor intrusion, or SVI. Soil vapor intrusion is the process by which volatile organic chemicals, like TCE and PCE, move from a subsurface source, like a groundwater plume, into the indoor air of overlying buildings. So within OU 1 and 2, the potential for indoor air impacts resulting from soil vapor intrusion is being controlled. In building 42, we have a sub-slab depressurization system, which is similar to a radon system. That has been installed and will be maintained. Next, building 45 and 46 has a soil vapor extraction system. That has been installed, and that will also be maintained. For the rest of the buildings, 14, 18, 19, 32, 33, 40, 41, and 47 have HVAC controls in place. And that, those will continue to operate as necessary. And in addition to that, indoor air sampling will be conducted to ensure that those HVAC settings are effective. Lastly, for any vacant buildings that become occupied within OU 1 and 2, or any new buildings to be built within OU 1 and 2, a soil vapor intrusion evaluation will be conducted. So in conclusion, the investigations completed at the site have evaluated all exposure pathways, and actions have been taken. The proposed remedy will address any potential for future exposures. Therefore, I believe that the remedy is protective of public health.
Now, going through and selecting the remedy, we had different remedial action objectives and things that we wanted to focus on to make sure that they were going to be met and looked at when we were selecting the remedy. So for groundwater, the objectives that we were trying to meet, we wanted to prevent the ingestion of groundwater above the drinking water standards. We wanted to prevent contact with or any inhalation from any volatiles that came off the groundwater. We wanted to restore the groundwater aquifer to the extent practical, and we wanted to remove the source of groundwater contamination. For soils, we wanted to prevent the ingestion or direct contact with any contaminated soils on the site. We wanted to prevent the inhalation of or any exposures to the contaminants that volatilize off contaminated soil. And we wanted to prevent mitigation or migration of the contaminants that would result in further groundwater contamination. And when looking at soil vapor, we wanted to mitigate any impacts to public health resulting from the existing or the potential of soil vapor intrusion into any of the on-site buildings. So the four alternatives that we looked at was a no action alternative, which is to do absolutely nothing at the site, including no monitoring. This is a requirement out of our circle program. We have to look at this. Alternative 2 was a no further action with just site management, and that would just involve environmental easement on the site. The site management plan would only involve continuing to run the SSD systems that Julia talked about, the SVE systems, and the HVAC systems. This would not include the groundwater extraction and treatment systems. This would not be part of alternative 2. Alternative 3 would include the groundwater extraction systems that's currently in place and enhancing them where possible, having a site cover and continuing the vapor mitigation. And alternative 4 would involve everything in alternative 3 and also enhanced biodegradation. So with the Circle program and Superfund program, we have several things that we need to look at to see if they meet our goals. The first one would be the protection of human health and the environment. Obviously, alternative 1, it's not protective, so we stop looking at that in our evaluation. The rest of the alternatives are protective. The next box we have to check, I'll say, is compliance with the New York State regulations. So the no further action of this site, it doesn't meet that anymore because groundwater is no longer being controlled at the site, and it could possibly recontaminate OU3, which we've worked very long with the injections, and we don't want to go back on OU3. We want to stay moving forward with OU3 remediation. So long-term effectiveness for alternatives 3 and alternative 4, they would both work. They're both going to still control the groundwater. Exposures to the public health are not going to be an issue. They're going to be controlled. Reduction of the toxicity and the mobility of the volume of the contaminants. Again, alternative 3 and 4 are both going to do this by controlling the groundwater and the site cover. Short-term impacts. All the remedies are going to have some short-term impacts on the site. There's going to be some small disruptions when they have to go monitor things, but both are very similar. Both are implementable. Both have their own issues and implementability on the site, depending on what activities are going on, and that needs to be taken into account. But they are possible. Cost effectiveness. Alternative 3 is more cost effective than alternative 4, just based on a lot of unknowns with alternative 4. But they're still going to move forward and looking at those. And land use, both alternative 3 and alternative 4 allow Huron to continue using the site for whatever they want and leasing it. There's no issues with them reusing that land and being able to use it as they see. So when looking at alternative 3 and alternative 4, the department decided to go with alternative 3 because with alternative 4, there's a lot of issues with access restrictions on the site. For those of you that have worked on the site, you know that there are sewer lines everywhere, there's water lines, there's overhead lines, there's fire lines. There's not a lot of room to put any more holes in the ground safely to do the bio injections. And the injections would cause a little more disruption to the site than what is already being done with maintaining the groundwater extraction wells that are there now and the monitoring wells. And also maintaining the reducing conditions needed in order to dechlorinate these contaminants is going to be difficult on OU 1 and 2 because the water table fluctuates whenever there's a storm because that area gets all the water that comes down off the hill. And also there's a lot of influx of the oxygenated water from the sewers and storm sewers that leak. So that's a contributing factor that will make biodegradation more difficult. So we decided to go with alternative 3. There's a few more things I want to expand on that are part of alternative 3 that I think are very key to this committee as well. So we're going to have the institutional controls that are going to get put in place, and that's going to be an environmental easement on the site with the state. There's going to be a site management plan in place on the site, and the site management plan encompasses many things other than, right here I just have listed the groundwater monitoring plan, which encompasses the entire site. The groundwater monitoring plan is all OU 1 through 7, it's all of them. The operation and maintenance plan that covers all the GTFs on the site, what needs to be done for all the wells. Also, in the site management plan, it will require the upkeep of all the vapor mitigation systems that they have in place on OU 1 and 2. There's also an excavation plan that goes into the site management plan. So anything that's going to be done soil-wise, that is also included in it. Also included in the site management plan is if there is a change in use in the building, they need to notify the department. Because if there's a change of use that says, hey, we're going to be able to look at the source area more, then that is required. If they're going to take down a building, they need to notify the department because that triggers a new investigation at the site if the building is going to be coming down. This is all part included in their site management plan. It's going to be at the site. And then we'll be continuing the groundwater extraction treatment system, which has been ongoing and it's shown to work relatively well over the last 40 years. We can go back and look at the groundwater contour maps if you want. But we're going to try to enhance them wherever we can on the extraction wells, possibly adding vacuum to some of the extraction wells if we can. There's also going to be a soil cover on site. We don't really know where it's going to be required right now. IBM is going to have to come up with a site investigation plan. They're going to sample the soils to see if the soils along like the sidewalks and stuff meet commercial use. So they have to, and if they don't, they're going to have to either put a cover on them or figure out what else they're going to do. They have different options you can do as a cover. It doesn't necessarily have to be a soil cover. And the asphalt's the same way. They're going to have to keep the asphalt in place and recover it where they need to on site. And then all the vapor mitigation systems will also need to be maintained. So that system, those systems will all be working. And the vapor mitigation also goes back into site management plan. So if building occupancy changes, as Julia noted, they need to go back in and redo air sampling. If it's a building that wasn't occupied and is going to become occupied, they have to go back and sample it to make sure if anything else needs to be done to make it safe for whoever's going to be in that building. And I know we went through that extremely quickly, so we're just going to go to questions and answers. Jim?
The role of thermal remediation, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. They did originally have the thermal in the focused feasibility study. The reason, I'm moving, I'm sorry. The reason we didn't look at it is just the implementability. There are so many pipes and stuff in the ground, it's going to be very difficult. And the thought of the thermal is that could also affect some of the biofouling that is already going on in the treatment buildings, and it could increase that and have to. increase the amount of upkeep on the wells and stuff as well. So that's kind of how, and the other thing with the thermal is these buildings are being used. So the space isn't readily available for us to do anything, and the slabs would actually get to where the sources aren't the buildings, because they're occupied right now.
What
If
about the
that
exterior
changes-
portions, like near the tracks where the contamination?
Going anywhere near the railroad tracks is a large issue onto itself with the railroad company. I know when they did Building 57, they weren't allowed to do anything anywhere near the tracks. They had to be very, I think it's almost like a 15-foot setback off the tracks, 15 or 20 foot setback off the tracks.
We had some information that possibly one of the train cars actually leaked some chemicals, so I don't know if that's true or not, if it's just hearsay. But have you any information on that?
I don't. I don't have any information on any of the spills on that. But again, it's gonna be, we can't do a lot of active remediation right next to the tracks.
Okay, and so the bioremediation, that's,
It's the same thing, it's just really difficult to get to right now.
okay, thank you.
If things change and the building's occupancy isn't an issue anymore, then we'll make them go look at something else.
So I understand if the building is torn down, you have to dig up the contaminated soil.
Well, if the building comes down, then they're gonna have to do the investigation, figure out what is there, and then give us a list of proposed options like they did here.
That may be an option or may not.
It may or may not be an option, yep.
Thank you.
But I think it's more appropriate to say that it's not that the remediation is an option, it's that there are remedial options. We do have access to contaminated soils under a building that becomes accessible, it's not that we may or may not look into it, but rather we look into which of the alternatives are appropriate. Maybe excavation, maybe vapor extraction, maybe thermal extraction, there's a variety of things, but it's not so much, gee, maybe we'll get to it or maybe we won't, but rather we'll look at which is the appropriate alternative at that time.
Yeah, I only asked because Walter Hang of Toxic Targeting in Ithaca said that's the best option. But, no, in the news, they've been talking about tearing down a couple of buildings on North Street, so that's why I
Well,
asked.
if and when that time comes, then an evaluation of the technologies which are appropriate will be done.
If you're talking about the old group buildings, Huron and IBM are fully aware, if those buildings come down, there will be an investigation before anything else continues.
All right, sounds good.
There will be an
The
investigation, yes ma'am.
ventilation systems you have in place, you know, for the buildings, where is it ventilated out? Outside, that we're all breathing it in when we walk by the buildings? I mean, how are you filtering that out? How do you know we're not breathing it in when we walk by?
So,
It has to go somewhere.
right, so how these buildings are set up, how the ventilation systems, they draw air from underneath the slab and then the pipes, go out and they vent up into the atmosphere.
Yeah, so we're breathing it in, basically.
Well, so
They have to measure the
Well, I mean-
level leaving it. It
Yeah, I
has to
know,
be
but-
a certain quality standard, or otherwise they would have to treat it.
right, there would be a
There's air
carbon.
standards,
I-
they cannot,
Okay.
they cannot send it
I got
into the
another
air.
question too. The wells. See, I know what's going on. The wells actually that you guys actually took the stuff from. You actually basically IBM took the stuff from one site and put it on another site, cleaned it up, put the wells, poured the concrete into the wells, and then they poured the chemicals in. So technically, you guys have no clue where the other chemicals went. And I even asked the people that were doing it because I was there on the sidewalk. And there's a lot of wells around, so you can't prove where all the contaminations are is because you're only monitoring certain areas. There's wells all throughout Endicott. There's North Street, there's where the buildings are in several buildings, and I know what the wells look like. They have the little locks on them. You're not monitoring all of them. So are you still monitoring all the wells?
Yes, I get semi-annual and annual ground reports, which is all OU3. It's all the OUs are covered by the monitoring wells. I have the map of all the wells if you want to see what we have the data
Well, I'm
for.
just
There's
wondering-
over 300 wells that I get
Once
data
the
for.
wells were actually poured, and I asked the guy that was doing it, because I was right there next to him, I go, what are you doing? He's like, oh, we're taking contamination from one site, pouring it across the street, and then they poured the concrete and the chemicals in at the same time. You have no idea that the stuff...
So you talked to someone who
Yes.
you observed putting chemicals in the ground?
No.
You
Sorry.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
Okay, let me
Put
rephrase
contamination
what I
from one
said.
place to another?
Okay, you actually took the chemicals from IBM and you put things, you removed them from up to other sites. I know what was going on. I paid
I'm
close
sorry, but
attention.
I don't understand what you're saying someone intentionally disposed of
No,
waste?
IBM cleanup. It's the IBM cleanup.
So you're saying we took contamination from one place and put it in another?
Yes, you did.
I gotta tell you, I'm not familiar with that.
I am.
Okay, well, after the meeting, I would like you to describe specifically where you think people were illegally disposing waste.
No, you guys were part of IBM. You guys were taking it from one site.
I work
putting
for
the
State
wells-
DEC, I'm not.
Well,
part of
I'm
IBM.
saying IBM was literally taking the chemicals from one site, transferring them to another site, and putting them into the wells. They were pouring concrete down and taking the chemicals and putting them into the wells and putting locks on them.
After the meeting, I would like to talk to you about your observations of
Okay.
illegal waste
I'll
disposal.
prove it.
Because that's not something I've ever heard before. Go ahead.
Well, it's true.
Yes, Mr. Bacon.
Now, like she said, with the stuff coming out of the pipes into the air, ambient air.
Yep.
Now, have you done any tests of the ambient air?
Yep, so in 2005, May
Yeah, but any
2005,
since then?
May 2006, IBM conducted an ambient air investigation because we were also concerned about the
Like
450
she says, everybody sees pipes. Don't you think it's I ask this question every meeting,
No, and
Don't
I'm letting you know that
2005, a lot of people didn't even have ventilation systems.
most of the ventilation systems,
About 2018, 19.
we have not done a follow-up outdoor
That's what
air
I'm saying,
study because in 2005 and 2006, IBM conducted a study that showed that there were no outdoor impacts from all of
Changed
these.
the whole game.
And that would have been the
That-
highest
That would
levels
have
that we would have been.
They started the injection wells, they started a lot more stuff after 2005. And all that time, they were pumping in the ground with all the injection wells, just pumping. Is the stuff coming out of the ground? It's gotta go somewhere. But the thing is, when it comes out of the ground, if you're not testing the air, it goes to Binghamton, Johnson City, and it ain't here. I tested it out there on North Street. You know where I'm at.
Yep.
When you gonna clean up my place? You never can. The cleanup's behind me, so I'm a little upset.
I know, I can see where you're
And
coming
there's been
from.
nobody. This guy over here, I said, it's sinking. He says, go get a lawyer.
No, we
Right.
can talk more.
But what I'm really concerned about now, I really know it doesn't have nothing to do about this, but our drinking water, they're planning on screwing around over there where the dump is. Our well is right across the street. We already got TCE coming in to that well. That's why there's an air stripper on from the dump. And the Kmart's sitting there and they're gonna knock it down. They disturbed that dump and we're all out of water, even though it ain't good. I think you guys really gotta keep an eyeball on that one.
Right, so
They shouldn't touch the blacktop on that. They should leave it just as it sits. Maybe put more blacktop on it.
Okay.
This question is for Julia.
Yes.
Julia, has the DOH entertained the idea of doing any kind of longitudinal study in regards to the cohort of employees and people that are still being potentially exposed in there as far as potential health impacts, getting sick, is anything, how many people are we talking? How many potential exposures are still going on in there?
So right now, I'm just going to talk about OU 1 and 2. Right now in OU 1 and 2, the indoor air impacts are being controlled because we have HVAC settings on some buildings and we're doing follow-up indoor air testing to make sure that those HVAC settings are controlling the indoor air. The other two buildings have those radon system installed, but back in I don't want to misspeak. Hold on. January of 2014, NIOSH came in and did a cancer study of the IBM workers.
But
So
those are cohorts of people that from decades ago, whereas you've got a live in situ situation with potentially hundreds of exposures in there right now.
But they aren't. But the idea of the study was when a time when we weren't aware of their perhaps past exposures. The exposures are under control. The levels are below or at background for TCE and indoor air, and they have been for some time. And the
I understand that.
So they're
but
not.
You're talking about a preventative paradigm as opposed to a diagnostic, an ongoing diagnostic paradigm of the people that are still in there. Whether they're getting sick, whether they're having any kind of adverse health effects, because I would be monitoring those people.
So you mean from past exposures if
From
they were
past,
there?
from the people that are working in there right now.
But
Right.
they aren't being exposed
They're
to
not-
levels
they're not
that
being
would be of a health
exposed.
concern.
Because, like I said, the indoor air in those buildings within OU 1 and 2 for TCE or around background, they're less than our 2 micrograms per cubic meter air guideline value for TCE.
What about pregnant women?
Yes, so that takes into account people with sensitivities, the elderly, pregnant women. That guideline is protective of that, and that is already put into that guideline.
Yes, Rick White.
Hi, Rick.
I wanted to ask about specifically, you're talking about sub-slabs underneath the buildings.
Yep.
Specifically, the 2 worst cases in Endicott as of 2005, 2006 was building 46, 120,000 micrograms per cubic meter. 2005, 2006, co-study by DEC and DOH.
So
All right? Wait, I'm not finished.
That's the air beneath the slab that you're
Understand
talking
that.
about. Yep. Okay.
I understand that. Well, I just want to set a level here. Building 47 across the street, after the viaduct, the old 47, measured 800,000 micrograms per cubic
Beneath the
meter.
slab. Yep.
Cubic meter is about the size of a typical refrigerator, indoor air. And 5 micrograms per cubic meter is the guideline. It's not a standard guideline. The
I
New York
never
State
said it
uses.
was a standard. I said it was a guideline.
It was always a
For
guideline.
TCE?
Okay. Yep.
Okay, I'm making that distinction because somebody has said in the past, this is a standard. No, it's not the standard. They never arrived at a number they agreed on for a standard. That being said, you're correct. It's not air anybody sticks their head under their basement floor and breathes. And that is the same for the workers in the buildings. However, as long as that stays in the dirt and stays underneath that slab, and there's any kind of disturbance in the slab itself, where some of those fumes can migrate, you have a potential for future, not present,
Yep.
but future
Exposures.
vapor intrusion.
Yep.
And if the buildings are still occupied, then those people are already exposed again, or first time if they just started working there. So I guess my question is, you're talking about soil covers, pardon me, and you're talking about covers such as subslabs, sidewalks, etc., all those kinds of things. In that case, inside the building at the basement floor subslab, there's already a cover there, already exists. So the question I have is, you can't do any remediation of any kind in terms of those subslabs as long as the buildings are occupied. Is that correct?
Remediation of the soil beneath,
Well, the
is what you're saying, right? Can't
Yeah,
do
the soil
remediation.
beneath the
But don't
subslab.
say they can't do any remediation, because included in the remedial program is the subslab depressurization and the maintenance of the ventilation systems to keep the air contamination from getting to the building. So don't say
Are
there's
the-
no
so-
remediation, but rather no remediation of the soil beneath the slab.
Are those buildings ventilated?
They're either, the ones that are occupied are, Julie, you know best, are
Yes.
managed either through subslab depressurization or through pressurization of the building by the HVAC system.
Okay, I'm going by history. I used to be on the Western Broome Stakeholders Board, and I started with that group in 2005. So I have a lot of history that may or may not apply to today's period. But the question still remains, as Nick pointed out and as Jim pointed out, there are people that are in a situation where there's exposure, but if the company doesn't let you go in the building and do anything,
I don't think that's true.
then there's not much that you can do about it. I'm not necessarily jumping on your side, I'm just saying the facts are the facts.
Well, the facts are that all the buildings, Julie, have been monitored. All the occupied buildings have been monitored. Those buildings that had concentrations which led to exposures which we perceive were unacceptable were managed either through subslab depressurization or operation of the HVAC system to pressurize the buildings. so that there are no longer any exposures in those buildings. So all the buildings where people are have been monitored, and there's been remedial action taken to eliminate the exposures within the guidelines. That's the current situation.
Right. Do you know
Right.
if there's been, when there was remediation in the Building 47 area, where the most of that contamination was in that soil under the subslab, do you know if any kind of washing, flooding, flushing has been going on that's changed any of that? In other words, have you done any subslab studies under Building 47?
I don't know if there has been a trend study in subslab vapor concentration.
No.
Now, what Rick's talking about with the inner slab, aren't there some areas they can use a thermal remediation, just a spot basis where it could be accessible? And why aren't they considering that?
Essentially, it's very difficult to run a thermal remediation under an occupied building. It's very difficult to do.
There's no unoccupied areas they could do it?
Not in the source areas.
Why is it so difficult?
You're essentially going to fail the
Access.
concrete. When you bake the ground, you fail the concrete.
But
To
there's
be very blunt.
There's new technology where they don't increase the temperature as high as they used. They used to be 1,500 degrees, now it's much less, like they did in 57, as you're aware.
But those were unoccupied structures where they weren't worried about whether or not they were going to impact the structure.
When they're not worried about what?
Worried about impacting the structure.
The heat impacts the structure?
Yeah,
In what ways?
I just described it to you. High heat fails concrete.
How many degrees is the new process?
Don't know.
Well, also with Building 57, it was empty when that was done. The building was empty.
Would that increase vapor intrusion, for example, by heating up the soil under?
It would depend on whether or not you were managing the vapors at the time. A well-designed system, you could probably manage that.
Okay.
But again, it's difficult to do under an occupied structure.
Sorry, Rick. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
Somebody else.
I was going to say, lady.
We have two responders here that are identified. May I know who they are?
Oh, sure. My name is Kevin Ferrar, F-A-R-R-A-R. I essentially Jess works with me. I work in the central office in Albany in DER, Division of Environmental Remediation.
And me?
Yeah.
And Maureen Shuck with New York State Department of Health. Maureen Shuck, New York State Department of Health.
I'm sorry, I came in
Go
a
ahead,
few
sir.
minutes late, and did you discuss where the original source of the contamination came from?
I pointed some of them out when I was doing the ISO contour plots. It's the tanks and the offloading areas by Building 47, 18, and 41? 41, I believe, near the railroad area, that corridor.
I mean, how did it occur though?
Oh, the initial one was leaking pipes. It was an underground tank that leaked. That's how that's where everything started out. They found a tank under the ground that had leaking pipes. And then, honestly, a lot of it was spillage from unloading tanks, offloading areas, poor housekeeping practices, we'll say.
And do we know how much was lost into the ground?
No. Nope. Hold on, Frank. Yes, sir.
My question is a little broader. What's the end game? In the sense, is this remediation process broadly construed to go on in perpetual, forever? Is there an end game? I don't know. I mean, do you expect to be here in 2039 or 2059 with the same old crap updating with different technology? Is there a comprehensive way of bringing this to rest technologically? That's a yes or a no, it seems to me.
What is it? When you say bring it to rest?
The problem you're dealing with.
Well,
Why we're here.
Well, when you say the problem, this is a multifaceted problem, which is broad, geographically broad, all kinds of different things going on, right?
I'm talking about the problem on North Street in Endicott. That's
Right.
all. Localized around the IBM
The
park.
problem right in the building, the end game is to prevent exposure, and as the soils become accessible, to address them. That's the end game. How long that will be, can't tell you.
So this could go, for all practical, what you're saying is this goes on indefinitely.
It might. It might. Yeah, let's be realistic. There are some environmental problems which you cannot solve 100%. Whether this is one, I don't know. But as far as we think about what the goals of the remedial program, prevent exposure. We don't want to impact people, impact the environment. And for this site, we do not believe we have any completed exposure paths. Correct, UH? For this site, we do not believe we have any complete exposure paths. That was not true for this site for many years. It is now true.
So this isn't a money problem. In other words, if money were no object, you would still be.
No, it's not a money problem, it's a technology problem. It's a physical technology problem. If things were out of our way, we could get at it. Just can't get at it right now, that's all. That part which is remaining. Most of this problem is near solved. It's only the last little bit. If you look at the concentration maps that Jess showed, the concentration of solvents in the ground under those buildings is down by like 99%. Now, there's still enough left to worry about.
What is the $8 million paying for?
The $8 million pretty much pays for the continued operation of the systems. It's expensive.
Within the IBM's responsibility?
Absolutely, 100%. Yep,
Yes.
that's right.
Yep. Okay, sorry, Frank hasn't. I'll let Lady in the Blue and then Frank.
I have a question. You have on the map here that Ideal Cleaners had an off-site plume.
Yes.
Okay, what about all the dry cleaners in New York City? Who's monitoring them? That they don't contaminate neighbors, the water, and the soil?
Oh my goodness.
In New York
City?
The health department?
Yes.
Yes, and
Yes.
dry cleaners throughout the whole state are a issue of focus and have been, Maureen, for probably, what, 20 years or more?
Yes.
We've been paying a lot of attention to dry cleaners around the state. If you look on the registry, there's probably a couple hundred dry cleaner sites.
They unfortunately are a widespread source of contamination throughout the state, throughout the country.
Yeah, whether they be on the Superfund program, the Brownfield program, we've been managing dry cleaners for a generation or more.
We're talking
in New York
older.
State.
The regulations are better now, so.
And I have another thing. I had a cousin who was born and raised in Endicott. She lived here till she was 7 or 8 years old. She transferred out to California and she came down with a brain tumor. It was benign, it wasn't cancerous. And one of the best neurosurgeons in the country did the surgery on her. She was under the knife for 12 hours. I don't remember his name, but he asked her where she was born in a highly industrialized community. And she lived on the north side of Endicott, on Oak Hill Avenue.
Frank, and then you, and then we'll go back to the back room. Frank?
So, continuing with the health effects, first off, do you consider the workers in the buildings and contractors as the public?
Yes. Yes, it's a disposal. They should not be exposed to, unless they're using the chemical in their processes. They should, it's a past disposal. And
I just wanted to make sure you didn't have a distinction between those. Now,
nope.
In the, I'm really concerned about the crawl spaces and some of the other areas that you have high levels. And what you are looking to do is use the ventilation systems and the HVAC controls to take care of a lot of the areas. So, what about folks going down into these crawl spaces?
So the crawl spaces, if we're talking about the same thing, aren't readily available for people to go down. Back in 2005, we did take some confined space entry, the crawl spaces beneath building 18. And we determined that occasional entry into these spaces are not immediate health concern, but those areas should be evaluated, and they were.
They were certainly higher. We wouldn't want those levels. We wouldn't want people to be working in those,
continuously,
on an 8-hour day, say. So the major concern, we certainly are aware about those crawl spaces, but we think with the limited use that there shouldn't be any
I can help you a little bit with that.
concern.
I worked at IBM for 28 years, and I know that there were areas in the bottom floors of all the buildings, well, most of them, that if there was a confined space, that say a maintenance guy or person had to go in, they had a sign, this is a confined space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was a warning, authorized personnel only.
Okay.
So they took some measures.
Okay.
But whether or not those signs are still there for
Yeah.
employees of the other companies,
Yeah,
I don't know.
there's a lot of other hazards associated with confined space, and certainly the VOCs is one of those for there, but it has its own concerns, certainly. That's why people have to be trained.
And do you have access to the BAE data from when they were doing their studies?
They were doing their studies back like 2011, 2012, 2013. I think there's actually in the repository here, I think those.
I think it's in the repository.
Yeah.
Okay.
If not, let me know and I'll send it to you, Frank.
All right.
The Yankee hat?
So anytime any concrete or anything is just disrupted and whatever, are you guys notified from I3?
I3.
Well, I3 is a leasing, so.
But does, okay, then I'll put it this way, does Huron notify you that there's been, 2 years ago, there was a underwater pipe that came into 47 and disrupted the whole back dock, and they had to jackhammer all that concrete out, and there was exposed soil inside the building. Were you guys notified of that?
No, and that's why we're requiring the site management plan. So those things are in place, so we do get notified.
Right.
So we can make sure when something happens, that we have the proper indoor air monitoring going on while those activities are taking place.
And I know that happened because I was there, I was working there.
He's nice.
So that's
And
not
then
hearsay.
And then I got the back room and then here.
And I can't.
Yes.
This site is labeled as a Class 2 site. Why are we waiting 13 years to test the air? Why? What stops you from testing the air tomorrow from the ventilation that's pouring out into it in those buildings? Like, why? Is it a finance thing that's stopping the DEC from testing the air? Is it a...
I'm not sure I understand.
Ambient air?
Hang on, what sampling are you talking about that we're waiting 13 years to do?
So you said the last time that the air that was tested from these buildings was tested in those vents was 2006, 2005. So why, if that was the last test, what stops you from testing the air tomorrow?
There's nothing that stops us from testing the air tomorrow. They're referring to those data as essentially the worst case data. That's before the remediation is going on. Things are no worse than that.
Right, so what stops you, when will the next test be, and if it's not a concern,
Never.
can the
You talking about the ambient air data?
Yeah.
The ambient air data back then was acceptable, so if in worst case conditions, ambient air was acceptable, then we don't need to continually monitor.
So is it fair to say that the DEC is just assuming that it's right, or are they not?
No, we're using science, when you think about it. If the concentrations were higher years ago and the ambient air was of acceptable quality, now that the concentrations are lower, there's no reason for the ambient air to be dirtier.
But it showed up.
If the public is requesting that it does be tested as their own.
That's a different story. If the public says DEC and DOH were interested in gathering ambient air data, then we'll take that request back to our managers.
So what's that process?
For the last.
Are people making a comment here tonight that you want ambient air data in the village of Endicott? Is that what you're asking? No, seriously. If you guys want to ask for something, now's the time to ask for it.
A million tapes, I asked for it at every meeting.
So you want ambient air data, so your request is ambient air data in Endicott. So we'll bring that home.
Is there, when can we maybe see that? Is that something you have to put to your board, or?
Well, I'll talk to my boss. I'll see her on Thursday.
Well, IBM's paying for everything.
I got a couple people.
Okay?
Yeah, but
I ask this question at every meeting.
But
and it doesn't happen.
But if the request is for ambient air data, we'll take that request back and we'll see if it makes sense to do it.
I don't see it either. That would make people feel safe.
Yeah.
Okay, just real estate point of view, I'm just curious. Huron owns the facility now.
Yes.
Say 2 buildings come down. And
Yes.
of course, this engages testing.
Yep.
And who is paying for that?
IBM.
IBM pays?
IBM is a PRP. IBM and Huron have their own.
It's part of their lease or whatever.
I don't get involved in who pays for what. As
Okay.
far as I'm concerned, IBM is a responsible party. If they have a side deal with Huron, that's between them and Huron.
matter
I don't
what
get
kind of
involved in it.
construction is
IBM is the
involved.
PRP. They're the ones that are on the order. Nope, hold on. In the back in the bills.
I just have a
And then-
quick concern here. The way the storms have been coming, like the last couple of years with the hard rains, and I've actually literally seen the storm drains can't overtake the amounts. Is there any concern that it's gonna mitigate that process of where the plume goes, or does that even come into play, or how's that monitored?
Well,
You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Okay.
And the stormwater, that's part of why the bio isn't gonna work, because the storm sewers leak. And everybody in Endicott knows the storm sewers are old, they leak. But with our extraction wells the way they are, it's able to keep up with that and adjust, and we have the holding tanks and stuff, so we are still containing that water regardless of the storm surges and stuff.
Okay, even with the last major flood that we had?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they see the rise in the
Right,
treatment
'cause
facilities, they
yeah,
see it coming.
It's just, I mean, over by where the water treatment plant, that area right there has just been devastated by just massive amounts of
Yeah.
water. It's insane.
The extraction wells seem to still be able to handle it.
There's a difference between having the flooding at the surface and having the groundwater come up enough such that the recovery systems can't handle it. You can have a lot of water at the surface, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your pumping well has been overcome.
How far is that plume down though? What, if you can explain, how far is the plume are we talking
Do
about?
you want to put the figure back up, Jess? You're talking about the groundwater plume around the plant or the whole village?
I grew up in Niagara Falls, but I love Canal area, so I have a big interest in this stuff.
Go to the big solution.
What's that?
The one from the
That one?
Okay, this is the big picture of the plume. Manufacturing areas up here, the river's down here. Right, this is the way things used to be. This is the way things are now. So the extended groundwater plume above standards is only immediately south of the manufacturing area now. So as far as offsite, virtually all of the offsite area meets groundwater standards now. Okay, so that's the big picture. So can you go back to the?
So how deep is that?
That's the overburden aquifer,
Okay.
which is it's a sand and gravel alluvial aquifer, so it's tens of feet down.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions about this figure before we move on? No. Right, so go to the plant site one. So we'll zoom into the plant site a little bit. So now here we are. Here's the area, the manufacturing area. This is I've done an IPA for perchloroethylene. Here's the two big source areas. And you can see now that the plume on site has shrunk quite a bit, and the concentrations have reduced from 500,000 down to 50 or 500. So concentrations going down by well over 90%. So this is perc. So the area on the site, essentially you have two zones to the left that are dirty.
So when it shrinks, does the concentration go up as well or no?
No, concentrations in the core go down. They went down from 500,000 to
Okay. Just so I'm educated, that's all, that's fine, thank you.
Wait, hold on. This lady in the blue header. Go ahead.
Sorry. This will dovetail off of the graphs you have up now. Are you starting to see an increase in any other type of degradation compound? Like, are you seeing that? Is vinyl chloride
Yeah, why don't you put up the
the
TCE
is
vinyl chloride.
going down, is vinyl chloride going up?
We don't see a lot of reducing conditions here. All right, so we're reducing, when you have reducing conditions, you get dechlorination. In other words, the chlorine comes off of the trichloroethylene, becomes dichloroethylene, the cis and trans TCE, and then vinyl chloride. That's what you're talking about. So what we see, TCE is right now in the 50 to 500. You got a vinyl chloride one or not? Or
I got vinyl chloride.
What about DCE?
Nope. I got the paper copies.
So we do see, but this is the process which generated DCE and vinyl chloride, dichloroethylene, and vinyl chloride happened already. So we don't see a lot of continued reductive dechlorination. We don't see a lot of perc going to TCE, dichlor, and vinyl chloroethylene, vinyl
So you don't anticipate that natural attenuation going on, or?
Well, there's probably only a limited amount which is going on here because we don't have really reducing conditions. Conditions are more acidic in the groundwater here. If we had more reducing conditions, we probably would see that attenuation, that natural breakdown of the chemicals. We just don't see that as much here. And it would be very difficult, considering the groundwater quality that we have here, to generate those reducing conditions, which is why bioremediation is probably not a good option for this site.
Thank you.
I got a really good question. Why did you take so long to clean the stuff up? Back in the day, my friend's 96 years old. She said back in the day when she worked there, they dumped chemicals in the basement. So all those chemicals have been here all these years that no one knew about. I mean, like most people didn't know about. So then you took forever to clean those up. How do we know you're not getting paid off by IBM?
Look at my bank account. There's no way I'm getting paid off by anybody.
I mean, these people are getting screwed. I mean, I didn't grow up here. I've lived here for 13 years, and just by living here, I've needed my gallbladder out. I mean, does that tell you anything?
Well, all I will say is what took so long. This has been worked on for years and years and years. The off-site groundwater plume is virtually gone. The on-site concentrations are virtually gone. So what took you so long? The answer is a lot of people have been working this for a very long time to get to where we are right now. So to say the department has done nothing over these years is a gross mischaracterization.
Why did it take so long to clean it up? I liked what the
All
reporter
right,
said.
why does it take long? Because once you release contamination into the environment, it's difficult to get it back out.
Exactly. You're never gonna get
It's just physics. Don't say you're never going to get it out.
TCEs are never going to be gone. Is because
I just showed you the plume map that shows that. That's wrong.
That's because they moved them to other places, and I
No.
can prove it to you. We're going. Can I go bring you for a walk after this, and I'll show you where.
Well,
they
I'm never going to go for a walk, but for you to say they put it someplace else, how did they put it someplace else?
Want me to explain? They actually.
Please do.
He'll help me too. They actually took the truck.
They didn't take them nowhere. They released them here. They ain't going nowhere. They cling to the soils. They sucked all the water out of the ground. That's why there ain't got groundwater vapor right now, because there ain't no water there.
Of course there's water there. The earth has not been dewatered.
They're rehydrating them.
I watched every pipe they laid out there.
All I'll say is your understanding of how the remedial system has operated is not
It goes
correct.
underneath my building, all right? Right to the injection well, 3 foot away where I'm sinking, that you told me to go get somebody to go hire.
Yeah, I remember
I ain't
last
got no money. I'm not rich. I'm not IBM. You couldn't even send the guy out to look at it.
The sidewalks are sinking too.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Question, I didn't realize the health department was gonna be here, and I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the health study that you did a number of years ago.
I have a contact number for you, so after the meeting, I will give you, his name is Jim Bowers. He was directly involved in that. He can speak more about that health
The
study.
comment I wanted to make was, at the time, I recommended that they include people that moved away and excluded people that just moved into the plume area. So I felt that the study group was flawed.
Okay, that's a valid
Do you
concern.
guys, are you gonna possibly look at that again and
You'll-
maybe track down some of the folks to get an accurate, estimate of cancer victims and whatnot?
Nope, that's a valid concern, and I will put you in
At
contact.
the time, you guys said it was too expensive to track all these people down.
That is a difficulty, but we'll certainly bring your concerns back.
NYS had a problem even tracking
Yes.
some of the workers in IBM that were not IBMers.
Right.
Because their organization, they happen to be Carpenters Union, the Electrical Workers Union, the Plumbers Pipe Fitters Union, did not keep medical records. So in order to have qualified medical records available to examine, they have to be, saved.
Right.
And NYS couldn't get that from any of those organizations, so unfortunately, all that data was out of that mix, and NYS came back with an incomplete report.
Yep.
And this is the kind of thing, this has been going on for a long time. I want to make just one other comment. I recall when I was working there in 1979 that they had a spill of 4,100 gallons of methylchloroform, IBM, on the railroad tracks in between Building 18 and the Conrail system. That was supposedly recovered. DEC was notified from what I can remember. But that wasn't the beginning of the pollution and the contamination that's gone into the ground. The other thing that I wanted to say was that at one time I spoke to a fellow by the name of Lou Schechter, and I believe he was either DOH or DEC, quite a long time ago. This was in the 80s. And I asked him about groundwater, and he said that typically, all things being equal, groundwater moves about 1.5 feet a year. But I've heard other information contradicting that over time. In light of all this that's been taking place, with the exception of the IBM buildings and the areas that are yet to be remedied completely, would you say that the groundwater has moved quicker than that, slower than that, or about that same rate?
The linear rate of groundwater flow, how much a piece of water moves through the ground, in this system is a lot faster than 1 foot per year.
Okay.
A lot faster. It may be feet per day. In the vicinity of the rubber
really?
recovery, in the vicinity of the rubber recovery wells, it may be
And what's the
fairly high.
dependency for that?
It's all, and it has to do with two things: how coarse the aquifer is, and then what the gradients are. You have a coarse aquifer with high gradients, the water's going to run like crazy. In the village of Endicott, once they put in the recovery wells and started moving the water, then it would have potentially been feet per day.
One thing you said earlier that I totally agree with, and it was a bottom line statement, and it's something everybody here should remember. Once you dump liquid into the ground, you cannot get 100% of
It's
it
hard to
back.
get all of it out, yeah, especially
Never
in the source
will. Never
area, where Jess used the term denapple, densinized phase liquid. That's the pure chemical, the TCE or the methylchloroform, whatever it was. Yeah. Once soil gets that liquid where the liquid itself was, it's very, very hard to get it all out.
That's right.
That contrasts with areas where it got dissolved in the water and then that water stained the aquifer further away. That stuff you can eventually get out. When it's coarse, like this aquifer here in Endicott, sand and gravel, is very coarse. You can see that it's almost all gone now. Almost. But in the source areas under those buildings where you had that liquid chemical actually touch the soil, that's going to be there a very long time.
Yep.
But what we can do is make it so it's not a source to people, it's not a source to groundwater rest of the village, and then when the time comes when we can get at it, we can directly apply some technology to
And that's
get that
part
last
of your
little bit out.
investigation, which has been going on ever since. Okay.
What Rick's talking about
Wait.
with the train card leaking.
No, I'm not talking about those.
Oh, sorry.
But hang on a minute, it doesn't surprise me that there were leaks from rail cars. It's really common at big industrial facilities that got bulk deliveries by rail to in the railroad offload areas, you know, where the siding is and they were pumping into the tank farm. That's a real common area where you had spills. If for no other reason than when they disconnected the hose, they drained them right there. Anybody worked at the plant in the old days? You probably saw that. It was not
Who's
uncommon.
responsible for that cleanup?
Well, IBM is the responsible party for this facility. They're the ones we have under order. They're the folks that we're.
So they're the ones that are paying you.
The railroad
They're not
company has
paying me.
call
No,
about
I
it.
don't. I get paid by the comptroller of the state of New York.
Do you have, can you give out some copies of that?
There's copies of the presentation. Well, there were some.
There were some there, if not.
But the answer is absolutely. If you want a copy of the presentation, we'll be glad to give it to you.
Thank you.
Would you like to receive it electronically? We can just print the PDF and email it to you. Yeah, there may be. If there's not some left, Jess can mail you
I was
some.
gonna say if there's, oh, there you go.
Oh, thank you.
Mark, right behind you now.
In the purple, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say something really quick.
What?
I think I'd be remiss in saying.
Wait, hold on, excuse me, can we just listen to each other?
The assertions that this woman over here was making concerning the idea that excavated soil from the site was not relocated to other off-site places. I wouldn't dismiss that out of hand. During the excavation of that Clark Street and Oak Hill Avenue facility that is currently housing Binghamton University, the Binghamton University facility, both Rick and I had spoken, to in some of our research, we had spoken to the groundskeepers and the grounds crew from the old IBM Heritage Country Club site that told us, basically on the record, that literally hundreds of tons of excavated soil from that site was taken and relocated to the areas up above Robinson and Farm to Market Road. And we also spoke to residents up there whose children got leukemia, which could be directly attributed to that. So those are facts. They might be anecdotal, but we have it.
They had a burn pit up on Robinson Hill from there, and that's where a lot of the IBM, the Endicott Trucking, I have to qualify it. The Endicott Trucking Company was a contractor for IBM at the time, and they took barrels of chem waste and put it in the trucks, and IBM said, "See you guys."
And where did
Left
this
the
go?
dock,
Where did it go?
And they went other different places. One of the places that Nick's is talking about is just above Traditions, the homestead. You go up a little dirt road, you go up to the top of the hill. One of the guys that we interviewed on camera, on the record, said that he was part of the crew that that they brought up those barrels of chemicals, they dumped them, and then he had to bulldoze them over and cover it over and just get out of there. This was back in, what, the 70s, Nick?
This is not.
Like circa 70s.
Yeah, this is not an uncommon story around the state.
Right, I understand.
Well, here's my question for you. Could you provide me with the information which would tell me where to tell people to look?
That's the old shooting range at EM.
I don't know where that is. Can you?
You guys got it on film, it's already.
When you say you guys have it on film, I'm asking someone to give me information that I could use.
Mary Pat Highland, who used to, she's retired now, she worked for the Binghamton Press. She did a whole story layout in the press on that burn pit and that area.
Did
So
anyone
I did that data for you.
anyone from DEC ever go there and look?
They did
I don't
reports
know.
on it.
Yeah.
So yes, they did. So did they look at it and find anything?
Yeah, but they had things for the cleanup on that.
So
There was a
so that's-
study, there was a study done.
So
by
that site was
DEC.
put on the registry and addressed in the remedial program? Do you know the name of the site?
IBM burn site, burn pit.
IBM, all right. So this is not a place that we need to go look at now. This is not a place we need to go back and look at. It's already been pointed to. It's already been addressed.
Yeah, they know exactly where it's at. They had, you guys had maps of it.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's not someplace we haven't looked into yet.
I wanted to express my appreciation for the very professional way that you've been presenting your information and your response. Thank you.
Since IBM, they've actually still dumped chemicals on Hayes Avenue. There's been trucks and everything, leachites. So IBM basically contaminated this place. Then they were allowing other companies from Pennsylvania dump leachites, and now Canada, supposedly I heard, is taking some of their chemicals and dumping them too.
Is they dump where they're illegally disposing waste somewhere?
Well, they're allowing it in this town.
I'm sorry.
That's what I heard.
Someone is illegally disposing waste in this town.
That's what I've heard.
Well, I believe.
You go there when it rains, you can actually smell it.
What I believe is they're getting leachate in. I'm not part of the water department, but I believe, my understanding is that leachate comes from different areas. The leachate goes to the water treatment plant that's on site and gets treated, and then.
But the water there doesn't look right. And also, the TCEs, just to let people know, the TCEs are the worst chemical. They cause cancer and everything. My best friend's husband's an environmentalist, and he said that's the worst chemical that can be in water. And once they're in the ground, they travel elsewhere, and you can never get them all out.
We already said that.
Yeah, but it just, I just don't understand why they waited so long to actually try to remove anything.
They've been doing it for 30 years.
I was going to say, the
Nobody's been
groundwater
waiting for
extraction system has been running since 1980.
But before that.
Yeah, so
We
it's
didn't know about
not
it.
right. It's not appropriate to say nobody's done anything then.
Took us years to just prove it was a carcinogen.
They put these two recovery things to stop us from going to the drinking wells. They had two of them. You know, one that's over there at the end of, right behind my place, I don't know if it's Grant or thing, and the other one's over here on Monroe and Arthur. They are the two to stop it from getting to the drinking well. I didn't pick them up. And then you guys made it a class 4, because, you know what I mean? So nothing was done. That's why nothing was done.
The
Until they
IBM
found
Endicott
out-
site is still a class 2.
No, it was a class 4, and then when they found out the groundwater vapor.
It was reclassified again.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, that was before my time. I apologize.
They had all these.
Got it reclassified.
15 years ago, the site was reclassified, correct? Yeah.
They had all these cancer clusters, Hillcrest, everything. Now, Redfield, Colorado, they found out about groundwater vapor. And then the EPA sent a letter to IBM saying you better check the crap, you know what I mean? They didn't send me a letter. I wish they did. It would save me a hell of a headache, because now I'm stuck with it.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a concern. I grew up in Endicott, and when I was a little girl growing up, there were ladybugs, there were grasshoppers, there were crickets and everything. Now, nothing. Nothing at all. My daughter lives in West Corner. She has crickets and lightning bugs. But right here in the immediate village, nothing. Even those animals, all those little insects were killed off. Praying mantises you used to see and everything, no more. The contamination killed those off. And you used to see the monarch butterflies also. They're gone. All that is now gone.
Frank?
So, my concern, and I'll put it in writing to you, is how is this site going to be left for the future? I don't like the idea of the HVAC controls as a way to prevent exposure. And
What specifically concerns you about
well,
that?
because I don't know what those controls are, where they're being controlled and all, I can't really speak to it. I only speak to the fact that personnel changes, procedures change, and I don't think it's a reliable way to prevent exposure.
So you think sub-slab depressurization is preferable to HVAC control, essentially?
I guess I would prefer a cleanup. And so if I were a company, and I guess companies are moving in, but I would be very concerned
Yeah, we have
about
those,
the exposure.
the Department of Health has those same concerns with that control. However, IBM continues to show and investigate and do, they've done 2 years of studies to show, so they have to continue to prove to us that they're effective. We're not letting them just set them and forget them. It's going to continue to be monitored. So yes,
Understand, yes. I
we
think-
will, and if at any time we feel that they are not protected, we will ask them to do more and change.
So if
So, yes.
the sub-slab depressurization is a fan, okay, fans are generally reliable.
Right.
But if you're trying to control an HVAC system, it's different. It's more complicated.
Yeah, that is true. That's very true.
Oh, hold on, I have a question back first. Are you all set, Frank?
Yeah.
You gonna
Thanks.
send that to me?
Jess, you got someone to the right here also.
Can I ask a
Oh,
question?
I'm sorry. I don't know which one of you is first. Go ahead.
She couldn't see it behind the
Sorry.
Well, you could fill me in on the buildings east of McKinley Avenue on North Street. They appear to be vacant.
The ones right facing the street, the ones, the older buildings that are right on the street.
Well, and they go backwards too.
Yeah, the
towards
old,
the
the older
Yeah.
buildings.
The ones-
Yes.
But those buildings appear to be vacant.
Yes,
Is
they
that
are.
because there's too much contamination in them to be
No,
turned
they're,
into what?
they're just inhabitable, there's mold.
Yeah, we were talking to IBM about that, we were down here last month, and essentially the buildings got wet inside, they're all moldy.
Right, they're
That's the
just,
problem with mold, is not pollution, other pollution?
No, because we could, if it was TCE in the ground under the buildings, we would address it with sub-slab depressurization or HVAC, and this is essentially the buildings they were not maintained well, and they're now uninhabitable.
And so what's gonna happen with those?
When they come down, eventually they're gonna come down, but right now,
So they're scheduled in?
there's no
Plan-
schedule for removal, but when they come down,
The plan is to remove them.
eventually, yeah. but-
Yeah, if they were to clean that up and want to, redevelop them and put people in them, they would have to prove to us that they're protective, so they would have to investigate the potential for soil vapor intrusion and address that so there's no exposure.
But I
Can't
see
you
that
go
they've
after
been
them for
refinishing
all that
the other
mold in
buildings
there
that are
and say
habitable.
that's
And
hazardous
those
to the
are
neighborhood?
obviously uninhabitable.
Yes, those buildings
Deteriorating.
across from where their offices are essentially, yeah, they're essentially haven't been
It's a
maintained.
good point, because if your house gets flooded, the town.
Well, when
I
you
said
tear
there's
it
no
down,
plan
it'll
to-
breathe all the mold.
He's in there, so
No actual
You gotta remember
plan
Huron owns those.
for their rehabilitation or
Well,
removal.
Not right now, no, that's my understanding, there is not.
But that's the only pollution that's there is the mold and stuff, not
Well,
the,
we haven't looked at
Yeah.
them from a vapor intrusion point of view, because there's nobody in there.
you haven't looked, but people in the neighborhood are concerned with that factor though.
Are they going in the buildings?
We were nearby and.
So are they going in the buildings, yes or no? They're not going in the buildings, right, so they don't have to worry about it.
Air still comes
Well,
out
we
of
do,
the
because
building.
we're there in the neighborhood.
All right, so again, this is the concern about ambient air, and that's the question I keep
Air
hearing
and
back
water.
there. Well, right now we're talking about air, so you're concerned about ambient air. In this case, you're saying there might be contamination coming out of the old buildings.
I'm concerned more with groundwater that provides evaporation and the pollution that you've addressed before. That's what, not the air.
Right. The groundwater under the manufacturing area.
And it moves towards the river past my house.
Yeah,
So I'm concerned.
Yeah, how far south of North Street do you live?
Between North and Monroe, which is
About a block down?
about, yes.
Yeah, it's unlikely you have groundwater above the drinking water standard right now. but it's almost, it's unlikely, yeah, it's unlikely that there's groundwater contamination above, for example, the groundwater drinking water standard right now under your house. But that doesn't mean there still might not be enough to drive mitigation. All I'm saying is that the concentrations under your house are a lot less than they used to be.
Well, I do see the events on various houses.
Oh, sure, there's nobody's taking vents off of houses.
Either was or is or was pollution.
Oh, there was, absolutely there was.
It
wouldn't be there, vents wouldn't be there.
Well, is it still there is my concern.
My understanding is that IBM has sampled the air coming out of the vents, and the concentration of TCE in the air coming out of the vents is very, very low.
But it depends on when they sample it. I mean,
They sample it quarterly? They were sampling it quarterly.
It would vary over the course of the year, depending on how high the water is and stuff. But that's our understanding, just so people are concerned about ambient air. Our understanding is that the air coming out of the vents in all the houses is very, very low.
And the wells that are in the neighborhood, there's one next door to me, that supposedly is monitoring the groundwater.
That's what the wells are for. Yeah.
And I'm wondering then what kind of readings, what is the status of that groundwater removal?
If you come up after the meeting and put your finger on the map, we'll show you on these figures what the
Okay,
concentrations
I will.
are.
Sir in the back?
Yeah, just curious, you know, sort of a number of years have gone by and I heard 453 homes. And speculation, another fellow said, what's the end game? Was it ever considered, or would it ever be considered, to remove those homes?
Remove those 453 systems? Not at this point.
To remove the home?
Was it ever, I guess my question was, what from...
To remove the systems.
We've been doing this for like a dozen years, and so people...
Ideally, that's...
No, he said remove the homes.
Remove the homes?
Is it bad, is it good?
Are you saying, I'm sorry, are you saying remove the homes or remove the mitigation systems?
Well, if, what we noticed from the neighborhood is that
I want to give
the
him the
people
answer.
in the homes are the same people that lived there before the, whatever this is.
Right. Yes.
And so, was it ever a consideration? Because the people that did live there a dozen years ago, and this became an issue, have left the area, and new people have come in. Nobody warning those people. There was another woman in Endicott who owned Interlet Hardware that must have owned 100 homes. They got turned over, and my question is, a dozen years ago, was it ever a consideration to remove the homes?
Well, I don't think any of us here from the state were working on the project 15 years ago, but I'm sure there are people in the room right now who were here. So were they talking 15 years ago about knocking down all the houses in Endicott and throwing you guys out? Were they talking about doing that?
they did it back in the day. IBM owned the town.
Well, and so the answer is no. So the answer is no. They did not consider removing the people from the
IBM
village.
knocked down all the homes from North Street to Monroe.
That was for expansion and.
That was,
Yeah.
You think so? That was not because of.
Yeah. So so anyway, in the mid '90s when the vapor mitigation started, is that when these houses were demolished? I don't know, but
It would have been cheaper for IBM to sell all the homes.
Well,
and knock them down, but the village of Endicott would not let that happen.
well, all I'll say is, in general, in the remedial program in New York State, we do not destroy entire neighborhoods to mitigate exposure. We try to find other ways to mitigate exposure to people. That's generally not something we do.
Buddy, are you saying that the properties were knocked down on those blocks where the parking lots are? Because of
They weren't gonna, I don't believe it was ever looked at. The mitigation systems are very cost effective.
Yeah, but I know,
But that's not what the people were gonna say in the streets in a dozen years.
well, I gotta tell you, I was not working on this site 15 years ago. I've looked through all the records and I have never seen that even mentioned in like a confidential memo or anything like that. And it was never, as far as I know, it was never considered to destroy the village of Endicott to solve this pollution problem. Rather, we apply other technology to try to mitigate exposure.
Regarding the mold, there are the two buildings.
The old group.
Oh, the old buildings, okay.
Typically, a municipality
From a
will,
capitalist perspective, that makes sense.
There's a
Someone
flood.
has a question.
Guy, we still have a question
Someone
here.
has a
If you can just-
question.
Okay, the two buildings with the mold, did you guys actually do any testing to see how severe it was?
How severe the mold was?
Yeah.
No.
No, we haven't done any buildings.
Sometimes municipalities, if there's a flood and a house becomes moldy, they mandate that it get torn down. Do you guys have the authority, historically, have you ever mandated?
In their
something
remedial
get torn down?
program, we wouldn't compel demolition for mold, no, we
That's
wouldn't.
never happened?
Not for that reason, no, we don't have the authority to do it.
But you're talking to them right now, what is that all about exactly?
We just asked them, what's going on with these buildings, and they said, they got wet and they're full of mold, so we're not using them. That's,
I'm already setting the precedent where,
In the air.
I'm just saying, I'm already setting the precedent that they know if those buildings ever come down, they already know, and Huron already knows that an investigation has to happen once those buildings are down. I just want to make sure I'm setting that precedent so they know what is expected of everybody.
Maybe it's a little bit like asbestos, they might have to spray it with water to keep the mold levels down as they're tearing the buildings down.
well, yeah, if they do a building demo on this site, we will probably have them go through and do what we refer to as community air monitoring, and we would have the monitoring fit whatever the potential exposures are. We would almost certainly do that. We have a lot of experience with demolition on hazardous waste sites, and folks gather a lot of data. And whatever the exposures are, that's what we have them monitor for. If it's asbestos, we have them look at asbestos. If it's lead, we look at lead. If it's organics, we look at organics. And if for some reason we have to look at mold, then we'll look at mold.
Potentially it could be cleaned up. And just to speak to the person that's concerned about new people moving in, there's actually legislation that requires landlords to let the tenants know about it.
I believe he's left.
Okay.
And IBM, whenever they do, if there's an SSD system on the building and they do the sampling, they have to report to that homeowner annually what the results
They know
are.
very well that something is wrong because the prices are so low.
Well,
That they have to question, wonder why. That alerts everybody.
Just a question on the HVAC system that Frank was referring to there. The decision was made to use the HVAC method to limit exposure. Was that a decision that was made in cooperation with DEC? Or
And the health
was
department.
it by DEC?
No, it was IBM's decision based on interactions with DEC and the health department.
There was a plan,
And they're still proving it to us. They are still going
only been a
through,
year.
yeah, they're still going through the monitoring.
The problem with the positive pressurization of buildings, it is a very complicated process, and the subsoil vapor extraction, really, the subslab vapor extraction is a proven method. Why isn't that being employed on those buildings? I mean, there's 6 buildings here, there's 7 buildings involved.
Because the indoor air of those buildings.
I understand that part of it, but I'm talking about now in terms of the
Environmental?
complexity and the effectiveness of actually reducing the intrusion from underneath the slab. Because slabs are easily compromised as
Right,
folks
and
are saying.
as part of that plan, what they're doing, they're checking the slab. They're making, it's a multifaceted process, so they go in, they check the slab, they seal cracks, they look at the damper positions, they figure out what Huron needs for their operations, and we take HAP site, which is the employees walk around.
No, I
Yeah.
understand all that, but I'm saying is that there
It's
are
probably-
proven methods that are probably
It's
more
probably because
effective
the
on
buildings are so big, and it really would be very expensive, the cost-wise, of installing systems, and they have proven to us, or they want to show that they can do these other means of controlling
But
the air.
The problem with the HVAC system, it's not helping to reduce long-term what may be underneath the slab.
Well, subslab depressurization is not designed for mass
It's not.
removal under the building.
Well,
So it only
That's
has a
not-
minor
yeah.
effect on the mass underneath the building.
It's going to have more effect than the pressurization is the point I'm making.
Oh,
And the long,
right,
well,
it's-
it will.
it will,
I mean,
it will
it's
have a
an
small incremental improvement, yes.
Yeah.
But will it actually change, like, how long it is till things are clean?
Well, again, the question is, long-term, whether this is going to be an effective way of preventing exposure to people. I think that Frank's point is well taken.
Yep. Well, we take that to heart. I mean, you guys are more comfortable with the subslab depressurization to get that pressure gradient into the ground rather than having high pressure in the building to get the pressure. Either way, you're just making so the air moves from the building into the ground. One way is by vacuuming under the building, the other way is by pressurizing in the building. But I will say that the health department is very diligent in looking into IBM studies about the use of these technologies. Very diligent. And the department has, another thing I'll say is that this is not the only IBM facility, and we've been reminding IBM on this and other facilities to make sure they follow the appropriate plans. On some other facilities, their tenants have not been as cooperative as we hope, and they're learning a lesson right now in compliance.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions for us?
Has IBM been fined besides?
IBM Endicott?
Yes.
Been fined?
For all the environmental impacts at all?
No, unless it was a long time ago, not that I'm aware of.
Unless it was part of the consent order, which I don't remember.
Not that I'm aware of.
Do they compensate the DEC for any of your efforts?
If we have response costs, then I believe they are responsible for response costs under the consent order. So, for example, if they have to pay Jess and Julia's salary, if there's...
What it's costing to oversee?
I don't... No, the answer is no, I haven't. If you're interested, we can find that out. So roughly what the state's costs are. But my understanding is that IBM is liable for cost recovery under the order. And if it's not in the order, then we simply send them a bill and tell them to pay or we sue them. That's pretty straightforward.
So what are they paying so far every year or recently?
I just don't have that information for you tonight.
I don't have that information, but they pay, for the groundwater treatment facilities, they pay for whatever disposal they cost from the different GTFs that they have running. They pay those costs. We don't see those costs. They pay it.
And the state's costs, I just don't know what they are. We can look them up. If you're interested, we can look up and see what they are. But
For the buildings east of McKinley that are probably going to be torn down, when does IBM or whoever contact you? Do they contact you before they do anything?
Yeah, there's in New York State on hazardous waste sites, there's a law that says they have to notify us at least 30 days in advance of any, and the phrase is significant change in use. And under that definition of significant change in use, demolition of a building absolutely would be a significant change. So they would have to say to us at least a month in advance, say, hey, we're thinking about ripping this building down. At that point, the site management plan that Jess described will kick in, and there'll be a whole list of requirements. And the reason they have to tell us in advance to make sure that we know they're going to follow those requirements. And we can remind them, hey, remember, you have to do this air monitoring or do this testing or whatever. But the law requires they notify us 30 days in advance.
And is a public meeting part of that?
It could be. I mean, if there's going to be I'll tell you right now, I'm retiring in July, but I will remind Jess from my retirement home and say, listen, if they're going to do a building demolition on this site, we will let you know.
I've been retired for 10 years. So I'm still here.
So you probably won't see me again in a public meeting on this side, but typically what happens is if there's going to be a major action like that, a big building demolition, some major action like that, we would probably come to you and tell you what's going to happen and then what the measures going to be taken to protect the public during the action. That's typically the way we do business.
Have there been any requests from either IBM or here on campus to change the classification of the site? Is there any discussion of that at all?
No.
Could that potentially take place at some time in the future?
Well, typically the sites are reclassified when the remedy's in place and operating. That's when it would go to class 4. Class 2 means that there's a significant threat and action needs to be taken, right? That's what class 2 means. If the actions are being taken, like when this ROD is issued and IBM gets all the things in place they got to get in place, this site may be reclassified to 4. And 4 doesn't mean there's not a pollution problem, it just means that the actions that are necessary to be taken are being taken. So it's possible IBM could petition the department, and that's the way it works. They essentially send a letter in saying, hey, we want to change the classification of the site. They could petition us and say, we would like to go to class 4. At which point we would look to see, are the remedies in place and operating? Is the remedy protective? And is it appropriate to say that the only thing that needs to be done here is to continue doing what we're doing? We're not there yet. That probably wouldn't happen for a couple of years. But if the site's going to be reclassified, that's another thing where we probably go back to the public and say, hey, we're thinking about reclassifying the site. But again, we're not there yet. It's probably going to be a couple of years. IBM may never petition the department. They may just sit back and just let things go the way they are.
Oh, in the back.
I have a question. Where the old forging works was in the corner of Hayes and North Street, could that have affected part of Building 57 since that's on the slant and could go underneath the railroad tracks and the chemicals they use there?
The old forging site.
We would have to look specifically at the maps. It's upgraded. It's uphill from Building 57.
Well, no, it slants down. It's like this. It's just before you go over the railroad tracks. If you were to make a left-hand turn at the corner of North Street and Hayes, the forging works used to be there, and I know they had some chemical spills there too.
Yeah,
some of that could have.
I don't know.
Slipped underneath and gone towards Hayes.
There's been study on that also, and that's directly across from the Ideal Cleaner site. Yeah.
That was primarily an oil spill, and they remediated it somewhat.
Oil and lead.
Lead too, yeah.
Over here?
But it was a Superfund site? Where's
It's
the
by,
old
it's
fort?
by Building 57.
Okay, so it's in
Where
this area?
Galt Chevrolet is.
Oh.
Oh, where's
The forging works there. There was a forging works there too. There was also forging works down the other end of North Street. I'm talking the one on the
Right,
corner of
okay,
Hayes.
so-
The corner of Hayes and North Street. You would turn left to go over the tracks.
Yeah.
Just before you cross the tracks on the left-hand side.
On the left-hand
That
side,
whole
right.
thing was all forging works.
Right.
And then when I was a kid, I used to go to HB
Right.
junior high, and we would always see chemicals seeping out of the area in there.
They DEC studied that. You can probably find it, yeah.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks, Frank.
Are all of the old reports here in the library or in wherever?
Should be, yeah.
That's because there's been so many reports generated over the last 30 years on this site. I don't know if they're all here or
I
not.
will tell you, the librarian here that keeps everything has said, please do not give me hard copies of anything anymore and
Stop.
give it to me electronically.
Please stop.
So I'm not sure what is still here.
But if you're looking for something, let us know and we can do.
I have a single space, 10 pages listing.
Your bibliography, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Well, actually, I got it from the library.
Did you? Okay. Okay.
It does not surprise me for a mature remedial program like this, been going on for more than a generation. It doesn't surprise me at all.
But the library has requested no more hard copies, only
Are
electronic.
they putting them online?
You'd have to ask them. I think so. I think they have an electronic version, probably. But they have requested no more hard copies.
I know what they said.
So.
There's something, there's more to it.
So it's still considered a Superfund site?
Oh yeah, it's going to be a Superfund site until no more action is required. Even if it's just monitoring, it's still Superfund.
And how many Superfund sites do you have in New York State?
In New York State, 1,400, 1,400, something like that. Yeah, and it really depends how you define it these days, because we kind of lump together the Superfund sites, the brownfields, the record corrective actions, spills. We lump things together, but as far as your classic on the registry Superfund site, I think we're around 1,400 right now.
And any other IBM sites?
Oh, there's quite a few. There's quite a few other facilities. One's around here, Owego. There's Endicott, Owego.
I have Poughkeepsie, East Fishkill.
Right, East Fishkill, Poughkeepsie, Kingston. And now some of these sites are either Superfund sites or they're being managed under record under their hazardous waste permit they may have had, or both. But there's several IBM sites in New York State.
And
So
so
IBM was a big company, so all the old legacy industrial sites.
And they're paying for the remediation of all these sites?
As far as I know, I think IBM has been identified and is under order or permit for all of their facilities.
All the sites I have there.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
On these subs, I'm still on the sub slab thing, something doesn't ring true here. Isn't the air discharge from these slab ventilation systems, isn't that tested for levels?
It is.
Yeah.
It's tested,
yeah, and they're all pretty darn low these days.
Yeah.
Well, the ones from the homes, they're all pretty low right
I'm
now.
really going back to these buildings again, because some of the buildings have decided to use the sub-slab ventilation, but these other ones weren't.
Yeah,
And I'm just a little suspicious as to why the decision was made to say, oh, we're gonna use HVAC there, was it because they thought the levels would be so low inside the buildings from the subslab migration? Or was it from the fact that they thought it might be so high that it's better to just try
It's going to be driven essentially by ease of operation and cost. What can you do that's
well,
reliable?
Ease of operation, well, I think fall under ease of operation.
Right, but that's the point. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to let them get away with doing something that's not protective for people inside the buildings.
Have the vapors been tested under those slabs?
In a lot of cases, yeah. We know what's under the buildings and we know what was in the buildings, and now that the systems are operating, we know what the concentrations are as the systems are being operated.
Well, you don't know because we're using HVAC to pressurize buildings. So
Just because we're using HVAC to manage the vapor intrusion does not mean that there hasn't been data gathered under the buildings.
That was my question, I don't know.
I think there's data under just about all the buildings.
Right, there's but what we're concerned about is the current exposure, so what people
No,
are
I know
breathing in.
I know where DOH is, I'm just talking through DOC,
okay.
DEC.
Well, we have the same opinion. We have no disagreement.
Well, it's come at the problem from two different directions, is what I'm saying.
Well, when it comes to protecting the workers in the building, we rely on our associates in the health department. We take what they have to say to heart.
And how did they get permission to allow workers to go back in there? How was that ever approved to let people go back on that site?
Because the exposures have been managed to the satisfaction of the health department.
I just want to mention too, I felt that the NYS study for the workers' exposure was a little bit flawed as well, the study group, because they included people that weren't really exposed to many chemical processes, and they included people who worked there as little as 6 months. So.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yep.
Yeah, it's one thing to look at what had been going on at these sites, at these buildings and the sites, and there were exposures to people, but we're fairly confident now, pretty confident now, that the exposures are being managed with the means that we're talking about tonight. And this is because, again, as Maureen said earlier, this is because people aren't using TCE in these buildings, so we're protecting them to, at a level which is commensurate with protecting any commercial exposure where people are working.
Have you guys historically found it productive and helpful for input from citizens and the Western Broome Environmental Stakeholder Coalition?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, you guys are here, this is your town, this is your home, so any information you can provide to us, we're here to
I will
listen.
say, it seemed like every test or every concern, you guys seem to have, addressed it over the years, so we appreciate that.
Thanks.
Does anybody have any other questions or concerns or anything you want to bring up, talk about? Thank you for coming.
Hi, thank you.
You wanted to show me where you were on the map?
Yes, I do.
Well, just come right up here. You might be able to see. Jess, can you put the blue map up?